On October 2025, the sun spoke. It did not use light or fire or thunder. It used silence. It carved a perfect shape of darkness into its own furious surface. This was no solar flare or sunspot. It was something stranger, a sudden, symmetrical void. The phenomenon was a coronal hole, a gap in the magnetic field where hot plasma escapes. But this one was unnerving. A massive, perfectly symmetrical darkness shaped like a butterfly, large enough for 35 Earths to fit inside, side by side. This darkness appeared exactly where both star and interstellar visitor had aligned. The visitor was 3I Atlas, a comet-like object that had journeyed from another star on an unbound, hyperbolic trajectory. For weeks, as 3I Atlas swung past its perihelion, its point of closest approach, our orbit put the comet and that hemisphere of the sun into solar conjunction, hiding this crucial rendezvous from all Earth-based instruments. We were blind. When the sun's rotation finally revealed the hidden hemisphere, the butterfly hole was there, dark and massive. Solar features are chaotic, lopsided, and asymmetric, driven by convection and random magnetism. Yet this hole was perfectly mirrored, its shape suggesting not randomness, but design. What if this wasn't a coincidence, but an interaction? What if the object we assumed was just a dirty snowball? 3I Atlas somehow influenced our star. What if the butterfly hole was a signature, a visible mark left by an invisible process? In ancient times, people saw the heavens as a stage for the gods, where great events were written in fire and shadow. We have simply traded the gods for physics and the butterfly for magnetic reconnection. But the quiet tension remains. The universe still sends us messages. Imagine standing on the far side of the sun, watching the comet's dark nucleus interact with the corona, knowing that the most profound events in the solar system often happen when no one is watching. The air feels sharp and dry with this unseen possibility. Where are you listening from tonight? Leave a comment telling me what time it is, where you are, and what shape you see in the darkness of the cosmos. We must drift now into the hidden weeks, the cosmic conjunction, and the evidence that deepened the mystery, because the object that left a mark on the sun already carried its own impossible secrets. The story begins with a void, a perfectly symmetrical darkness that materialized on the solar surface in October of 2025, right as the interstellar wanderer, 3I Atlas, made its closest approach to our star. This phenomenon, officially catalogued as an unusually large coronal hole, was shaped like a butterfly, with twin wings of shadow, an unnatural perfection that immediately placed it at the center of a cosmic mystery. A coronal hole is, in the simplest sense, a magnetic door that opens in the sun's upper atmosphere, the corona. The sun is a boiling ocean of plasma, threaded with immense magnetic field lines. Normally, these lines loop back into the sun's surface, trapping hot plasma and creating the bright, feathery glow visible during an eclipse. But sometimes the lines open up, extending out into space instead of curving back. When that happens, the super-hot plasma escapes, streaming away as a high-speed solar wind. The resulting region appears dark in ultraviolet and X-ray images, giving it the name coronal hole. They are common features, appearing all the time. But this one was different. It was enormous. Scientists measured it at roughly 35 times the size of Earth. To put that in perspective, a chain of 35 Earths, side by side, would stretch nearly 450,000 kilometers, roughly the distance from Earth to the Moon. This hole was bigger than anything most solar observers had seen in recent memory. And it wasn't just the scale, it was the symmetry. The hole had two symmetrical lobes, like wings mirrored across an invisible central axis. Nature, particularly at the scale of stellar dynamics, tends to be chaotic and irregular. Galaxies spiral, nebulae bloom in asymmetrical chaos, and even solar features like sunspots and magnetic loops are usually lopsided. This butterfly hole looked designed, possessing an unnaturally perfect geometry. The leading scientific interpretation, of course, remained firm. This was a natural magnetic phenomenon. The sun's magnetic field constantly reconfigures itself. Field lines break and rejoin in a process called magnetic reconnection, releasing enormous energy, which can create solar flares and coronal mass ejections. If two regions of opposite magnetic polarity were positioned just right, the open field lines could, theoretically, form this kind of mirrored structure. It is rare, perhaps, and certainly unlikely, but not an outright violation of physics. But the coincidence was too loud, too perfectly orchestrated. The butterfly hole appeared on the exact hemisphere of the Sun that had just hidden 3I Atlas during its perihelion passage. For weeks before this, both the comet and that hemisphere of the Sun were in solar conjunction, hidden from all Earth-based instruments. We couldn't see what was happening there. The comet was at its closest point to the Sun, experiencing maximum solar heating and gravitational stress. If anything unusual was going to happen, this was the time. Then the Sun rotated, taking approximately 27 days to complete one revolution on its axis. As the hidden hemisphere slowly turned into view around mid-November, the butterfly hole emerged from the limb, fully formed. The correlation was immediate and unsettling. The solar physicists pointed to coincidence. They said the hole formed naturally and simply became visible when the Sun's rotation brought it into our line of sight. But the timing was unnervingly precise. If the hole formed or grew rapidly during the period when 3I Atlas was in close proximity, that changes the equation entirely, opening the door to interaction. This leads to the uncomfortable question: did this tiny comet, a visitor only a few kilometers across, influence the massive Sun across millions of kilometers of space? Was the butterfly hole a side effect of what the probe was doing, perhaps harvesting energy, communicating, or performing some kind of scan or measurement? The mythic undertones were impossible to ignore. A butterfly, a symbol of transformation and metamorphosis, appearing on the surface of our star right as a visitor from the ultimate unknown passed by. It felt less like random physics and more like a cosmic signal. Even the skeptics admitted the timing was uncanny, because in astronomy, timing is often the first clue that something deeper is going on, and this timing was just too perfect. To understand this mystery, we must first look at the unique, strange characteristics of the visitor itself, before and after its hidden rendezvous. To appreciate the profound nature of the butterfly hole, we must first understand the enigma of the celestial object that accompanied it. Delving into Part 2, recap of 3I Atlas's perihelion. This segment explores the data gathered on the comet before it plunged behind the Sun, detailing its unusual origin and the crucial blackout period that hid its closest approach. 3I Atlas carries the official astronomical designation C 2025 N1, with the 3I meaning it is the third confirmed interstellar object ever detected. This object was not supposed to be here. It was an immigrant, a wanderer from the space between the stars, telling a story written in ice and velocity about another stellar neighborhood. Its detection by the Atlas Survey telescope in Hawaii on July 1st, 2025, immediately alerted the astronomical community. Interstellar objects are rare, fleeting, and precious. They offer the first and only opportunity to study material that formed around other stars. This object was inbound, approaching the Sun on a trajectory that was immediately classified as hyperbolic. This path, with an eccentricity greater than 1, meant it was unbound to the Sun. It was just passing through and would never orbit the Sun again. The implications were profound. 3I Atlas had been drifting through the galaxy for a long time, possibly millions of years, carrying velocity picked up from its journey, and perhaps even its originating star system. Its speed was terrifying, traveling at tens of kilometers per second, faster than anything we have ever built. Its point of closest approach, or perihelion, occurred around October 29th to 30th, 2025. Its distance from the Sun was estimated to be between 1.36 and 1.44 astronomical units. An astronomical unit is the distance from the Earth to the Sun, about 150 million kilometers. So 3I Atlas was staying slightly farther from the Sun than Earth, but still close enough that the tremendous solar heating would begin to warm its surface and trigger outgassing if it contained ice. The nucleus size was estimated to be somewhere between 440 meters and about 5.6 kilometers across. It was large enough to be more than a simple dust grain, large enough to hold secrets, and that is where the cosmic blackout began. During its most critical phase, the perihelion passage, 3I Atlas, disappeared behind the Sun from Earth's vantage point. This is the period of solar conjunction. The glare of the Sun completely obscured the tiny object. No optical telescopes could penetrate the light. For those crucial days, the most interesting phase of the comet's journey happened off-stage, hidden from view. Furthermore, the same geometry hid the entire hemisphere of the Sun that was facing the comet. We had a double blind spot, the comet hidden, and that side of the Sun hidden, both in close proximity, both doing whatever they were doing, and we had no eyes on either. What we did see before the blackout already suggested an object that defied expectations. Its brightness varied in unusual ways. Its color shifted over time, moving from reddish hues, typical of a dusty, irradiated surface, toward a more neutral color as it approached the Sunday. This suggested active processes, a surface dynamically responding to the Sun's energy. Its composition also showed early signs of being strange, with initial spectroscopy hinting at carbon dioxide levels far higher than expected for a water-rich comet. All of this data, meticulously gathered by the Hubble Space Telescope, the James Webb Space Telescope, and multiple ground-based observatories, painted the picture of an object that was already an outlier. It was a visitor with a strange history, and its journey through our solar system was not going to be a simple, predictable pass. And then came the silence. For those critical days, we could only wait. When the Sun rotated and 3I Atlas finally re-emerged, heading back into the void, the data was even stranger. The comet had changed, and so, dramatically, had the Sunday. The correlation between the comet's closest approach and the sudden appearance of the geometric butterfly hole on the newly revealed solar hemisphere became impossible to ignore. The timing was a clue. We must now dive into the details of the solar anomaly, looking for its subtle, magnetic mechanism. Our lens now tightens on the Sun itself, examining the details of the colossal and symmetrical structure that emerged from behind the star, a phenomenon we call Part 3, the observed solar anomaly. This coronal hole defied the Sun's normal standards for size and shape, setting the stage for the mystery that followed. To grasp the scale of this anomaly, you must first understand the environment. The Sun is a churning, electrically charged star, and its magnetic field is the master of its surface and atmosphere. This energy dictates everything from sunspots to solar flares. A coronal hole is an area in the Sun's atmosphere where the magnetic field lines, instead of looping back, are fully open to space. This allows the hot plasma to escape, creating a localized reduction in density and temperature, which makes the area appear dark in X-ray and ultraviolet light. The solar wind streams out of these holes at much higher speeds than usual. The anomaly that appeared after 3I Atlas's perihelion was of a terrifying magnitude. It was reported to be approximately 35 times the size of Earth. The largest coronal holes typically span millions of kilometers. This one was at the extreme end of observed size, larger than anything most solar observers had seen in recent memory. But it was the shape that haunted the observers. It was an unnervingly perfect, mirrored structure. 2 lobes stretched across the Sun's southern hemisphere, like the wings of a butterfly or a moth. Coronal holes do evolve, grow, drift, merge, and split. But this one appeared suddenly, fully formed, as if someone had punched it into the corona with a template. The magnetic field data confirmed the identity. Open field lines extended from both lobes, streaming solar wind out into the heliosphere. Everything about it screamed normal solar physics, except for the geometry and the timing. Solar physicists argue that even a symmetrical shape like this can arise naturally. It could be explained by the specific, rare configuration of the underlying magnetic field. If 2 regions of opposite magnetic polarity were positioned just so, the open lines could form this kind of mirrored structure. It is statistically unlikely, certainly, but not a violation of physics. The physics of a magnetically active star allows for this interpretation. The Sun's field is in constant flux, shaped by convection currents deep beneath its surface and twisted by differential rotation, the fact that the equator spins faster than the poles. In the coincidence scenario, or Model A, the comet merely happened to swing around the Sun at the same moment a large coronal hole opened on that side. The simplicity of this explanation is its strength. It requires no new physics. However, the weakness is psychological. The timing feels too cinematic. The hole formed or grew rapidly during the critical weeks when the comet was at its closest point to the Sun, on the same hemisphere we could not observe. When the Sun rotated and the hole emerged around mid-November, the correlation was too tight to ignore. The 35 Earths of darkness seemed to be a response to the presence of the interstellar visitor. This leads to the interaction scenario, or Model B. This possibility suggests the comet's presence triggered or accelerated the hole's formation. What if the comet, with its own ionized tail and high-velocity outgassing, injected a dense plasma cloud into the solar corona at exactly the wrong moment? This injection could potentially perturb the local solar magnetic field, acting as a catalyst to restructure already unstable field lines. The analogy used by some theorists is that of a landslide triggered by a pebble. The slope is already at its breaking point, and the comet's plasma acts as the final nudge that tips the structure into a full coronal hole. While solar physicists rightfully stress that a comet is tiny and its magnetic influence should be negligible compared to the sun's staggering energy, the symmetrical, dramatic timing of the butterfly hole continues to suggest that the story is not yet complete. We must now turn to the most challenging aspect of the puzzle, the sheer timeline and coincidence. We now confront the core question that has been hovering over this entire narrative, like the unwavering shadow of the probe itself, engaging in Part 10, connecting the dots, the causal link. Did 3I Atlas influence the Sun, triggering or shaping the butterfly hole, or was the timing merely a cosmic coincidence? We are forced to choose between two competing models, neither of which is entirely satisfactory. Model A, the simplest explanation, and Model B, the one that makes the most narrative sense. Model A, the coincidence scenario. This is the interpretation favored by most solar physicists, relying on Occam's razor, the principle that the simplest explanation is usually the best. The Sun is a churning sphere of plasma with a magnetic field in constant flux. Coronal holes form when magnetic field lines open, allowing plasma to escape. A giant coronal hole shaped like a butterfly, while striking, is not an outright violation of anything. It is the natural, if rare, result of magnetic reconnection and differential rotation. Under this model, the timing is coincidence, nothing more. The comet just happened to swing around the Sun at the precise moment. A large, unusually shaped coronal hole opened on the same side. The perceived connection is simply human pattern recognition at work, turning synchronicity into meaning. This model requires no new physics. The weakness of Model A is psychological and statistical. The timing feels too cinematic, too perfectly aligned with the comet's perihelion and its suite of established anomalies. The symmetrical jets, the non-gravitational acceleration, and the near-ecliptic alignment. Model B, the interaction scenario. This possibility is preferred by those who find the cumulative anomalies of 3I Atlas too great to ignore. What would it take for a comet to influence the Sun? The most plausible mechanism involves plasma injection. When 3I Atlas rounded the Sun, it was shedding enormous amounts of gas and dust, much of it ionized plasma. If, during its hidden weeks, it vented material far more intensely than anyone observed, a massive outgassing event necessary to explain the mass loss paradox, this dense plasma cloud would have collided with the solar corona. Plasma carries magnetic fields, and when two plasma regions collide, magnetic reconnection can occur, violently restructuring the magnetic topology. This event would not have created the coronal hole out of nothing, but it could have acted as a catalyst, triggering or accelerating the opening of magnetic field lines that were already under immense stress. The Sun was already primed for a magnetic opening, being near solar maximum. The comet's immense plasma cloud, a product of the unique GCR processed crust, simply acted as the pebble that triggered the landslide. If the artificial probe hypothesis is entertained, Model B becomes even more plausible. If 3I Atlas is a controlled object, it might be engineered for directed plasma release or electromagnetic emissions. Such a probe could modulate magnetic fields intentionally, whether for navigation, data gathering, or stellar harvesting. The weakness of Model B is scale. The Sun is simply too large, too energetic, and too overwhelming for a comet to affect meaningfully. The total energy released by a subsequent solar flare on the same hemisphere dwarfed anything the comet could have influenced, reinforcing the Sun's dominance. Yet, the timing is too cinematic. The butterfly hole remains a profound solar anomaly, and the anomalous comet remains its only plausible cosmic accompaniment. We are stuck in the dead center of possibility space, with both narratives suspended. The scientific community leans toward coincidence, but probability is not certainty. The door to interaction remains open, if only by a sliver, waiting for new observations. This profound magnetic instability on the Sun's surface only worsened in the weeks that followed, producing a massive event that reminded humanity who is truly in charge of the solar system. The world, faced with the image of the butterfly hole and the knowledge of the comet's hidden passage, exploded in a frenzy of theories, prompting us to examine Part 5, Public Reaction and Speculation. This demonstrates how humanity reacts when the vast, predictable cosmos suddenly presents a profound and unsolvable enigma. Within hours of the first images, the story of the symmetric solar void went viral. Social media and online forums, from astronomy subreddits to conspiracy threads, were flooded with analysis and argument. Because mysteries sell, especially when they involve the Sun, an interstellar visitor, and a cosmic choreography that seems too perfectly timed. The public reaction quickly split into three predictable camps. First were the cautious scientists. They urged caution, reminding the public that science advances through careful measurement, not wild speculation. They showed models of how magnetic reconnection could, in theory, create symmetry, and that large coronal holes have been observed before, albeit less photogenic ones. Their position was Model A, the coincidence scenario. The Sun is an active star, and this was merely the natural variability of magnetism. They were correct to urge caution, for science requires extraordinary evidence for an extraordinary claim. Second were the enthusiastic analysts. This group consisted of passionate amateur astronomers, postdoctoral researchers, and engineers who began performing their own orbital mechanics and energy calculations. They noted that if the comet had a strong magnetic field or was outgassing charged particles at high rates, it might interact with the Sun's magnetic field. Although solar physicists dismissed this, arguing the comet was too tiny and its magnetic influence negligible compared to the Sun's overwhelming power, the timing was the constant nagging factor. They worked under the assumption of Model B, interaction. Third were the pattern seekers. This group dove deep into the possibility of artificial intent. Their theories were based on the long list of 3I Atlas's own anomalies: the fixed shadow, the symmetrical jets, and the controlled thrust that made it look like a probe even before the Sun incident. They speculated that if the object were artificial, it might have systems designed to interact with the Sun's plasma during perihelion. The butterfly hole, in this view, was not an accident, but a side effect of the probe's activity, perhaps harvesting energy, performing a stellar scan, or even communicating. The shape itself became symbolic. The butterfly represents transformation, suggesting the event was a message or a warning that something fundamental was about to change. The human brain is relentlessly wired for pattern recognition. When a coincidence is this large, this symmetrical, and this perfectly timed, it is hard not to wonder if there is an agent at work. This is the very engine of myth and science. We see the butterfly, and we immediately ask, who or what is transforming? But the scientists were right. The scale mismatch is absurd. The total energy released by a major solar flare, like the one that followed this event, dwarfs anything the comet could have influenced. Comets are tiny, fragile things made of ice and dust. The sun is a fusion furnace whose magnetic field dominates the entire solar system. Yet, the core question remains: did the sun's instability, which led to the hole, also create conditions favorable for the comet to release an immense, directed burst of charged particles? If the object is not a passive, icy wanderer, but a controlled object, a small, directed emission could act as the pebble that triggers the landslide. The mystery only deepened as observers discovered that the comet itself was already behaving in highly anomalous ways, even before the conjunction. These anomalies, taken together, made it easier to believe the impossible, lending weight to the theories of artificial intent. The anomalies stop being coincidences, they start being clues. This brings us to the strange behavior of the comet that we could see, its chemical fingerprint. The stage for the solar drama was set by a deeply strange actor, even before the sun's rotation revealed the butterfly hole. 3I Atlas was already breaking every expectation, forcing us to catalogue Part 6, Comet Anomalies, Beyond the Sunday. This segment serves as a crucial reminder that the object was no ordinary comet. Imagine the perfect celestial body designed to pique curiosity while maintaining the guise of an inert natural object. 3I Atlas had already mastered this cosmic deception. Before its rendezvous with the sun, the object had already displayed 3 anomalies that baffled the scientific community and lent critical weight to the idea of intentionality or extreme natural processing. Anomaly 1, the impossible shadow and symmetrical jets. Long before perihelion, observations revealed a perfectly straight, dark lane cutting across the comet's glowing coma. This feature refused to wobble or smear despite the comet's rapid 16.2-hour rotation. For a feature to remain visible across the coma, locked in a single orientation relative to the sun, on a body spinning like a top, is an act that defies the chaos of natural cometary physics. Furthermore, high-resolution images revealed jets extending from the nucleus that were crisp, linear spikes and disturbingly symmetrical, not the messy, erratic plumes expected from random outgassing. It looked like a set of controlled thrusters that were actively compensating for the nucleus's spin. Anomaly 2, non-gravitational acceleration. When astronomers calculated the object's trajectory, they discovered a persistent, small deviation, a non-gravitational acceleration that pushed the object slightly off its predicted path. This nudging force, measured at around 0.02 millimeters per second squared, was constant, steady, and directional. Natural outgassing is typically erratic and variable. The behavior of 3I Atlas's acceleration looked precisely like low-thrust propulsion being consistently applied. This force was enough to shift the object's position by thousands of kilometers over time. Anomaly 3. Extreme compositional oddities. The chemical analysis of the coma was highly unusual. Observations from the James Webb Space Telescope revealed a ratio of carbon dioxide to water vapor of approximately 8:1, among the highest ever measured. This suggested the object was not water-rich like most solar system comets. Furthermore, it exhibited a low abundance of carbon chain molecules, which is often a signature of thermal processing. Compounding this were unconfirmed reports of unusually high nickel vapor content in the coma, a feature associated with differentiated planetary cores and, significantly, industrial processes. The coma was not a natural byproduct. It was a chemical emission system. These three anomalies, which were visible before the encounter with the Sun, led to the radical hypothesis that 3I Atlas was not an interstellar comet at all, but a probe built right here in our own solar system by an ancient, vanished civilization. This theory posited that the object was using a sophisticated masking strategy, coating itself in ice to mimic a comet, and executing its trajectory with precision to mimic an interstellar object. The fixed shadow, the controlled thrust, and the unusual chemistry were simply tells the subtle imperfections that revealed the intentional design beneath the camouflage. When a seemingly natural object displays three profound anomalies: geometric precision, low thrust propulsion, and exotic chemistry, the mind is forced to consider the non-natural. It means that the object that caused the butterfly hole on the Sun was no ordinary piece of space debris. It was already a cosmic puzzle. The encounter with the Sun, therefore, was not a random collision of events, but the interaction between the Sun's furious magnetism and a visitor that was already behaving like a sentient system. This realization adds an intense layer of tension to the coincidence, making Model B, the interaction scenario, psychologically compelling. Now, to ground this extraordinary object in natural science, we must explore the strongest natural explanation for its chemistry. To give the Sun's butterfly hole a proper context, we must first allow for the most compelling natural explanation of 3I Atlas's strange chemistry, examining Part 7, Galactic Cosmic Ray Processing Hypothesis. This theory offers an elegant way to explain the object's exotic composition without invoking extraterrestrial intelligence, arguing that the object's long journey through the galaxy is the true sculptor of its strange features. This hypothesis begins with the concept of galactic cosmic rays, or GCRS. These are not light rays, they are high-energy particles, mostly protons and atomic nuclei, that originate from violent events across the galaxy, such as supernova explosions and neutron stars. These particles travel at nearly the speed of light, and interstellar space is saturated with them. If 3I Atlas has been drifting through the galaxy for millions of years, as its trajectory suggests, it would have accumulated a massive dose of this cosmic ray exposure. The outer layers of the comet would have been bombarded constantly, slowly altering the original ices into something entirely new. This process is known as radiation processing, or radiolysis. Researchers ran laboratory experiments to simulate this, bombarding simple ice mixtures like carbon monoxide and water with high-energy particle beams. The results were dramatic. The carbon monoxide converted into carbon dioxide, and the surface developed a complex, dark, organic-rich crust. The modeling showed that this processing could create a crust potentially 15 to 20 meters deep, encasing the original comet like a durable, protective shell. This perfectly explains the key compositional anomaly we observed. The extremely high carbon dioxide to water ratio is not a sign of unusual formation, but a signature of its journey. The carbon monoxide of the comet's birth has been cooked into the carbon dioxide of its travels. The resulting dark, reddish, organic crust also explains the color shifts and polarimetric anomalies we saw before perihelion. The implications of this hypothesis are a paradigm shift for interstellar astronomy. For decades, scientists assumed that interstellar objects brought us pristine samples of other star systems. But if the GCR hypothesis is correct, then what we are seeing is not the comet's original state, but the comet after eons of cosmic weathering. We are sampling the journey, not the origin. The true, pristine material might still be there, deep inside, beneath the crust, locked away like a time capsule. This processed shell also explains the dynamics of the Sun encounter. The thick crust acts as insulation. The heat of the Sun takes time to penetrate it. Once it does, the heat reaches the subsurface ice, which sublimates and builds intense pressure beneath the sealed crust. When the crust finally cracks, gas erupts outward in a powerful, sustained vent. This model, called delayed outgassing, perfectly explains the mass loss paradox and the sustained, high water loss rates observed far from the sunday. The energy is not instantaneous. It is stored thermal energy. However, even the most elegant natural explanation does not account for the Sun's anomaly. The GCR theory explains the comet's composition, its strange jets, and its sustained activity, but it does not explain the perfectly symmetrical butterfly hole that appeared at the precise moment of conjunction. The question remains, did the immense, sustained outgassing required by the GCR model as the thick crust sublimated release a plasma cloud so dense that it served as the pebble that started the landslide in the Sun's magnetic field? The GCR hypothesis gives the comet the power and the sustained activity to be a potential catalyst, making the butterfly hole a statistically extreme, yet physically plausible, consequence of cosmic ray processing. We must now turn to the final piece of physical evidence that defied the models: the trajectory. Let us now turn to the cold, merciless equations of space, dissecting Part 8, Trajectory and Orbital Oddities. The object's path through the solar system, which was supposed to be the most definitive piece of evidence for its interstellar origin, became instead another profound anomaly, pointing toward unnatural precision. Orbital mechanics is typically the most honest part of astronomy. Light can mislead you, and chemistry can be ambiguous, but gravity is blunt. Orbits are equations, not opinions. And yet, the path of 3I Atlas refused to fit the natural model, presenting three crucial orbital oddities. Oddity 1. The near-ecliptic alignment. Interstellar objects, arriving randomly from deep space, should approach the Sun from random directions high above the orbital plane of our planets, or below it. Statistically, they should show no preference for the ecliptic, the flat plane where Earth and the other planets orbit. Yet, 3I Atlas approached the inner solar system along a near-ecliptic path. This is statistically unlikely for an object chosen at random. Why would a natural object have such an improbable alignment? If the object were part of an interstellar exploration program, Aligning with the ecliptic would be highly strategic. It is the most efficient way to maximize the probability of encountering planets, dust, magnetic fields, and potential biosignatures. It is the cosmic equivalent of checking the main hallway instead of rummaging through storage closets. This alignment, therefore, whispers of intent and observation. Oddity 2. The early arrival. The comet reached its closest approach to the Sun, its perihelion, approximately 11 to 14 minutes ahead of the time predicted by purely gravitational models. This minor discrepancy in timing implies a non-gravitational acceleration that was not accounted for by the initial models. As we know, non-gravitational acceleration is common in comets due to outgassing, but the nature of this particular force was problematic. It was a persistent, small nudge that appeared to be controlled rather than chaotic. More importantly, the required thrust implied by the timing discrepancy seemed to require a degree of mass loss that was inconsistent with the visual observations of the outgassing. The non-gravitational acceleration simply did not match the observed outgassing. Oddity 3. The solar OPH maneuver similarity. This oddity is the most speculative. When the orbital mechanics were closely scrutinized, the shift in trajectory, the effect of the constant, small nudge, was found to be mathematically similar to an OPH maneuver, a concept used in celestial mechanics. OPH stands for optimal planetary hiding, or optimal perihelion hyperbolic. The theory suggests that a probe could use a controlled burst of thrust near a star to dramatically shift its trajectory with minimal fuel expenditure, effectively using the star as a slingshot or navigational node. This maneuver would be executed at the moment of maximum efficiency. The non-gravitational acceleration of 3I Atlas was a signature etched into the astronomical databases. It was a tiny blip in timing that could become, in hindsight, the first breadcrumb in a trail leading toward an extraordinary revelation. The cumulative effect of these three oddities, ecliptic alignment, early timing, and low thrust behavior, formed a pattern that is, at a minimum, worth taking seriously, not as proof, but as a hypothesis that challenges the assumption of a passive celestial object. If 3I Atlas is natural, then it is a comet shaped by a statistically improbable set of coincidences, a unique outlier that forces us to rewrite our textbooks on comet physics. If it is not natural, then we are witnessing a quiet flyby, a reconnaissance mission millions of years old, a probe that adjusted its trajectory precisely to encounter our planetary system. Either way, the trajectory left its indelible mark, a signature that remains suspended between coincidence and causation. The anomalies intensified as the comet receded, forcing us to examine Part 9, Jet Structure and Mass Loss Paradox. This segment focuses on the specific physical and energetic challenges posed by the object's post-perihelion, outgassing the very jets that were the most likely cause of the non-gravitational acceleration. When 3I Atlas finally re-emerged from behind the Sun, ground-based telescopes captured a stunning, yet confounding, visual. Observers detected multiple jets streaming from its nucleus, possibly 7 or more, each one sharply defined and remarkably stable over time. While multiple jets are common, the structure and stability were far from ordinary. Anomaly 1. The anti-sunward jet. Most perplexing was the observation that at least one prominent jet appeared to be streaming toward the Sun, creating what astronomers called an anti-tail. In normal cometary physics, sublimation occurs when ice turns directly into gas, and the resulting pressure propels dust and gas away from the heat source. To produce a jet pointing sunward would require a highly unusual configuration, perhaps a vent or cavity oriented in a way that directs material back toward the Sun, or some other force acting against the natural flow of energy. While anti-tails can be an optical illusion caused by trailing dust, the jet on 3I Atlas appeared to be actively venting material in a sunward direction. This was mechanically baffling. Anomaly 2. The mass loss paradox. This anomaly posed a direct challenge to the laws of energy conservation. Researchers focused on the energy demands implied by the jets, noting that if the outflows were driven primarily by carbon dioxide sublimation, the energy required to sustain them must come from the Sunday. At the comet's distance of 1.44 astronomical units, the solar radiation striking the surface provides a fixed limit on the amount of material that can sublimate per second. Calculations using generous estimates of the nucleus size revealed that the observed jets demanded far more energy than could reasonably be delivered by solar illumination alone. The mass loss required to sustain the jet's velocity and duration suggested a sublimation rate far higher than the available sunlight could support. The numbers simply did not add up. Natural reconciliation models were proposed. They suggested the comet's surface was unusually porous, allowing sunlight to penetrate more deeply to reach subsurface ice layers. Or perhaps internal cavities acted as amplifiers, focusing pressure and ejecting material with greater force. The GCR hypothesis of a thick, insulating crust also contributes, suggesting the observed jets were powered by stored thermal energy that had penetrated the surface days or weeks earlier. However, the energy deficit persisted. Sustaining multiple high-powered jets over weeks of observation simply demanded more energy than 3I Atlas could collect from the Sun at that distance. This mismatch opened the door to alternative, highly speculative hypotheses. The possibility of an internal heat source was raised, suggesting that chemical reactions or radioactive decay contributed additional energy, or, in the most radical interpretation, the jets were powered by something entirely artificial. A probe with an internal power source like a radioisotope thermoelectric generator could vent controlled amounts of propellant to produce thrust. This could replicate the observed behavior while maintaining the appearance of natural cometary activity. The situation was further complicated by the extreme negative polarization of the coma dust, suggesting the particles were either extraordinarily fine or had unusual reflective properties, perhaps engineered materials. The cumulative effect of the anti-sunward jet, the energy deficit, and the unusual polarization strongly suggested that the object either violated known cometary physics or possessed an internal mechanism independent of direct solar heating. The mass loss paradox remains a statistical extreme, stretching the limits of our understanding of how a dirty snowball should behave. This makes the possibility of an interaction with the Sun, the event that created the butterfly hole, all the more likely to have been catalyzed by an object operating on a different set of thermodynamic rules. We now confront the core question that has been hovering over this entire narrative, like the unwavering shadow of the probe itself, engaging in Part 10, connecting the dots, the causal link. Did 3I Atlas influence the Sun, triggering or shaping the butterfly hole, or was the timing merely a cosmic coincidence? We are forced to choose between two competing models, neither of which is entirely satisfactory. Model A, the simplest explanation, and Model B, the one that makes the most narrative sense. Model A, the coincidence scenario. This is the interpretation favored by most solar physicists, relying on Occam's razor, the principle that the simplest explanation is usually the best. The Sun is a churning sphere of plasma with a magnetic field in constant flux. Coronal holes form when magnetic field lines open, allowing plasma to escape. A giant coronal hole shaped like a butterfly while striking is not an outright violation of anything. It is the natural, if rare, result of magnetic reconnection and differential rotation. Under this model, the timing is coincidence, nothing more. The comet just happened to swing around the Sun at the precise moment a large, unusually shaped coronal hole opened on the same side. The perceived connection is simply human pattern recognition at work, turning synchronicity into meaning. This model requires no new physics. The weakness of Model A is psychological and statistical. The timing feels too cinematic, too perfectly aligned with the comet's perihelion and its suite of established anomalies. The symmetrical jets, the non-gravitational acceleration, and the near-ecliptic alignment. Model B, the interaction scenario. This possibility is preferred by those who find the cumulative anomalies of 3I Atlas too great to ignore. What would it take for a comet to influence the Sun? The most plausible mechanism involves plasma injection. When 3I Atlas rounded the Sun, it was shedding enormous amounts of gas and dust, much of it ionized plasma. If, during its hidden weeks, it vented material far more intensely than anyone observed, a massive outgassing event necessary to explain the mass loss paradox, this dense plasma cloud would have collided with the solar corona. Plasma carries magnetic fields, and when two plasma regions collide, magnetic reconnection can occur, violently restructuring the magnetic topology. This event would not have created the coronal hole out of nothing, but it could have acted as a catalyst, triggering or accelerating the opening of magnetic field lines that were already under immense stress. The Sun was already primed for a magnetic opening, being near solar maximum. The comet's immense plasma cloud, a product of the unique GCR processed crust, simply acted as the pebble that triggered the landslide. If the artificial probe hypothesis is entertained, Model B becomes even more plausible. If 3I Atlas is a controlled object, it might be engineered for directed plasma release or electromagnetic emissions. Such a probe could modulate magnetic fields intentionally, whether for navigation, data gathering, or stellar harvesting. The weakness of Model B is scale. The Sun is simply too large, too energetic, and too overwhelming for a comet to affect meaningfully. The total energy released by a subsequent solar flare on the same hemisphere dwarfed anything the comet could have influenced, reinforcing the Sun's dominance. Yet, the timing is too cinematic. The butterfly hole remains a profound solar anomaly, and the anomalous comet remains its only plausible cosmic accompaniment. We are stuck in the dead center of possibility space, with both narratives suspended. The scientific community leans toward coincidence, but probability is not certainty. The door to interaction remains open, if only by a sliver, waiting for new observations. This profound magnetic instability on the Sun's surface only worsened in the weeks that followed, producing a massive event that reminded humanity who is truly in charge of the solar system. As if the butterfly hole was not enough to signal profound magnetic instability, the Sun followed its symmetrical warning with a stunning act of raw power, compelling us to analyze Part 11, Solar Flare Storm, the X 5.1 flare. This event, an explosion of radiation on the same hemisphere, added a critical and terrifying layer of data to the mystery. Shortly after the butterfly hole rotated into view in late 2025, the Sun decided to remind us of its true nature. An active region, designated AR4274, unleashed an X 5.1 class solar flare. The X designation is reserved for the strongest category of flares, the heavy hitters of solar weather, capable of causing radio blackouts, damaging satellites, and triggering geomagnetic storms on Earth. The raw power of an X 5.1 flare is staggering. Flares are bursts of radiation, a violent, sudden energy release that occurs when twisted and stressed magnetic field lines in an active region suddenly snap and reconnect. The difference in energy between the initial stressed configuration and the final relaxed one is released explosively as a blast of radiation across the electromagnetic spectrum, traveling at the speed of light. What made this event so relevant to our story was its location. Active region AR4274 was on the same hemisphere of the Sun that had hosted the butterfly hole, the same region that had been hidden during 3I Atlas's perihelion. The speculation immediately flared up. Was the X 5.1 flare related to the coronal hole? Did the same magnetic instability that opened the hole also prime AR4274 for this massive energy release? Or, reaching further, did the comet somehow seed magnetic instability across that entire hemisphere? Solar physicists caution that flares and coronal holes, while both magnetic phenomena, operate on different scales and through different mechanisms. Flares involve reconnection in concentrated, closed loops of magnetic field lines, while coronal holes involve open field lines that allow plasma to escape. You can have one without the other. They are different expressions of the Sun's magnetic complexity. Yet, the cluster of events in the same time frame, butterfly hole, X 5.1 flare, all on the same hemisphere that hosted the comet, keeps drawing eyes back to the correlation. It looked less like random solar weather and more like a region of the Sun that had been fundamentally disturbed. The flare had immediate, real-world effects on Earth. Radio communications on Earth's dayside were disrupted for minutes, with pilots reporting temporary loss of high-frequency radio contact. The burst of X-rays ionized Earth's upper atmosphere, creating a radio blackout. Simultaneously, energetic particles from the flare, the advanced guard, reached Earth minutes later, lighting up detectors on satellites and ground stations. This was a major space weather event, the kind that reminded us how connected we are to the Sun's moods. The Sun, in 2025, was approaching solar maximum, the peak of its 11-year cycle, so finding a large flare was not surprising. But the location, the timing, and the alignment with the comet continued to defy the simple explanation of coincidence. The total energy released by the X 5.1 flare dwarfs anything the comet could have carried or influenced. The power imbalance is absurd. Comets are tiny, fragile things made of ice and dust. The sun is a fusion furnace. The flare, therefore, doesn't prove or disprove any connection to 3I Atlas. It just adds another layer to the mystery. It is a powerful reminder that the sun is never quiet, but that the strange things that happened during the comet's passage happened together in a cluster too tight to dismiss. This violent event, in turn, produced a delayed consequence that we could all see in our night sky. The sun's furious activity, the butterfly hole and the powerful flare culminated in a spectacular, beautiful, yet unnerving display on Earth, forcing us to examine Part 12, Auroras from a Cannibal Solar Storm. This segment traces the path of two solar eruptions that merged into a single, amplified disturbance that delivered a powerful, magnetic blow to our planet. Flares are bursts of radiation, but a coronal mass ejection, or CME, is a physical eruption of plasma. Think of it as a magnetic bubble being blown off the sun's surface, a mass of billions of tons of material hurled into space. It travels slower than light, taking days to reach Earth, but when it arrives, it can trigger geomagnetic storms. In late 2025, following the X5.1 flare, two separate CMEs erupted from the sun, hours apart, traveling along roughly the same trajectory. The second one was significantly faster. It barreled through the solar wind, overtaking everything in its path, and what it overtook was the first CME. The collision happened somewhere between the sun and Earth, and the two plasma clouds merged, creating what space weather forecasters call a cannibal CME. This combined structure is denser, more energetic, and more geo-effective than either component would have been alone. It's like two storms merging into a superstorm. When that cannibal CME hit Earth's magnetosphere, the protective bubble of magnetic field that surrounds our planet, the results were dramatic. The geomagnetic storm reached G3 levels on the 5-point scale used by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration's Space Weather Prediction Center. G3 is classified as strong, enough to cause voltage irregularities in power grids and slightly drag satellites out of orbit. Auroras erupted across both hemispheres, sweeping south with intensity. The aurora borealis, the northern lights, reached latitudes as low as the northern United States and Central Europe. The sky was a gallery of glowing green curtains and red filaments. For a few hours, the planet was bathed in light from above, a visible reminder that Earth sits inside the sun's atmosphere. This powerful storm had clear technological impacts. Airlines rerouted polar flights to avoid communication blackouts over the poles. Power companies monitored their transformers for geomagnetically induced currents, GICS, that could cause overheating. Satellite operators put systems into safe mode to avoid damage from charged particles. The human reaction, however, was mostly awe. There is something primal about watching the sky glow, something that speaks to a deeper connection to the cosmos. We are, after all, witness to an interaction between our planet and our star, mediated by invisible magnetic fields. But the observers tracking 3I Atlas couldn't help but notice the timing. Here was another major solar event, the cannibal CME, that originated from the same hemisphere, the same active regions that had been hidden during the comet's conjunction. First the butterfly hole, then the X5.1 flare, now a double CME eruption producing one of the year's strongest geomagnetic storms. The sun was speaking. Whether it was responding to the comet or just going through its natural cycle, it was putting on a show. The cluster of three major anomalies, a geometric hole, a massive flare, and a cannibal storm, all originating from the same longitudinal sector in the immediate aftermath of the comet's passage, remains the single greatest argument against a pure coincidence. This magnetic violence gives the interaction scenario its visceral, terrifying power. The strange drama of the Sun forced us to look even closer at the object itself, where another profound inconsistency emerged, leading us to examine Part 13, Interstellar Comet Water Mystery. This segment explores the paradoxical problem of 3I Atlas losing massive amounts of water far from the Sun, where ice should have already gone dormant. As the comet receded, heading back toward the interstellar void, observers reported something highly unusual. 3I Atlas was losing water at surprisingly high rates, even at large distances from the Sunday. Estimates suggested water loss of around 40 kilograms per second, sustained over days or weeks. That is roughly 80 pounds of water every single second, continuously. For a comet nucleus only a few kilometers across, sustaining that kind of outgassing requires either massive exposed ice deposits or some internal process driving sublimation beyond what solar heating alone can explain. Water sublimation is highly temperature dependent. Ice requires energy input, usually from sunlight, to break the molecular bonds holding the solid structure together. At the comet's distance, several astronomical units from the Sun, post-perihelion solar heating is weak. The intensity of sunlight drops off rapidly with distance, following an inverse square law. Most comets slow their outgassing dramatically once they move beyond about 2 astronomical units. They become faint, inactive, and dormant. But 3I Atlas seemed to keep venting. This persistent, high-rate activity far from the Sun suggests a problem. Either the comet has unusually volatile rich ice that sublimates at lower temperatures, or something else is heating the interior. While carbon monoxide and methane ice sublimate at very low temperatures, the observed loss was specifically of water ice. Model 1, delayed outgassing. This ties back to the GCR processed crust. The outer surface is covered in a thick, insulating shell of organic, radiation-baked compounds. This crust delays the heat transfer. The heat absorbed closer to the Sun penetrates slowly, reaching the subsurface ice only days or weeks later. When it finally does, the ice sublimates, building intense pressure beneath the sealed crust. This pressure eventually cracks the crust, and gas erupts outward in a sustained vent. This is the stored thermal energy model, and it is plausible for comets. Model 2, internal heat source. This model, more speculative, suggests the comet contains radioactive materials. Radioactive decay releases energy as heat, and if enough radioactive isotopes were concentrated, you could maintain active sublimation even far from the Sunday. This is how moons like Europa and Enceladus stay warm beneath their icy crusts. While radioactive isotopes are rare in comets, the object's interstellar origin means we cannot rule out exotic isotope ratios from other stellar populations. Model 3, thermal management system. The most radical explanation loops back to the artificial probe theory. If 3I Atlas carries onboard systems, computers, sensors, A power source, those systems generate waste heat. Space is a vacuum, and heat transfer relies on slow radiation. Venting water could be a deliberate process, either for propulsion or, more fundamentally, thermal management. Ejecting, vaporizing water provides both cooling and thrust. The sustained 40 kilograms per second of water loss is highly provocative and keeps the idea of an internal engine or an active cooling system alive. The water mystery is a reminder that 3I Atlas refuses to be simple. Every answer raises new questions. The high, sustained rate of water loss at large distances is another data point favoring a non-solar dependent energy source, a quality that is essential for the longevity of a space probe and adds yet another layer of circumstantial evidence to the artificial hypothesis. We reach a moment of necessary clarity, putting the two competing narratives side by side to examine Part 14, the artificial or natural debate. This segment summarizes the strongest arguments for why 3I Atlas is just an unusual comet and why it might be something much, much more. The natural hypothesis, the extreme outlier. The argument for a purely natural origin is powerful and grounded in known physics. 3I Atlas exhibits all the hallmark characteristics of a comet. It developed a coma, it produced jets of gas and dust, and spectroscopy confirmed the presence of textbook cometary materials like water, carbon dioxide, and silicates. The anomalies, while profound, can be reconciled by invoking two key concepts: extreme variability and cosmic processing. First, extreme variability. Comets, even within our own solar system, are notoriously chaotic. They explode, split, and jet material in unexpected ways. An interstellar comet, hailing from a distant star system with unknown formation conditions, should be even more unpredictable. The symmetrical jets, the anti-sunward streams, and the mass loss paradox could simply be at the extreme end of natural variation, a set of statistically improbable coincidences that do not violate the laws of physics. Second, cosmic processing. The galactic cosmic ray hypothesis offers an elegant explanation for the chemical strangeness. The object's long journey through space coated it in a thick, irradiated crust that altered its surface chemistry, changing the carbon dioxide to water ratio and giving it the unusual polarization. This insulating crust then caused the delayed outgassing, explaining the sustained water loss far from the sunday. The Sun encounter was a statistically unlikely but passive interaction between the Sun's natural instability and the comet's unique, radiation-baked surface. The artificial hypothesis, the accumulation of anomalies. The argument for an artificial origin is based not on a single piece of evidence, but on the accumulation of multiple anomalies that create a narrative of design. Anomaly stack. The shadow and jets, the fixed, non-wobbling dark lane, and the stable, symmetrical jets suggest active stabilization and internal structure. Trajectory. The near-ecliptic path and the early arrival due to non-gravitational acceleration are signatures of active trajectory manipulation, consistent with an optimal perihelion hyperbolic maneuver. Energy deficit. The jets appear too energetic for the nucleus size, requiring a sustained power source that solar heating alone cannot provide, hinting at an internal engine or radioisotope thermoelectric generator. Solar event. the perfectly symmetric butterfly hole, appearing at the exact moment of the comet's hidden perihelion, followed by a cluster of massive solar events in the same region, is a correlation too tight to be dismissed as mere statistical fluke. This hypothesis suggests the comet is an interstellar probe, using the sun's gravity as a slingshot, perhaps to harvest energy or perform observations. The object is a masterpiece of cosmic camouflage. The unresolved conclusion: the debate is currently stalled in a space of profound uncertainty. The core of the problem is a lack of definitive, empirical evidence. Neither side can definitively rule out the other. To break this stalemate, a spacecraft encounter a rendezvous mission to intercept 3I Atlas would be the only definitive test. Only a probe capable of a rapid flyby and direct sampling could capture high-resolution images, measure its magnetic field, and analyze its exotic isotopic chemistry. Until then, 3I Atlas remains a historical puzzle. Its behavior forces us to look beyond our comfortable solar system models, reminding us that the universe is far larger and stranger than we can capture in our equations. The question is no longer what the comet is, but what it has already taught us about the limits of the natural. Let's bring the camera in closer now, not to the shape of 3I Atlas, but to its skin, to what it's made of. Because when scientists pointed their spectrometers toward that strange traveler, what they saw made the whole story even stranger. The data showed nickel, pure nickel, gleaming, consistent, metallic without a trace of its usual twin, iron. In nature, those two metals are inseparable, born together in the hearts of dying stars. But in industry, we separate them every day. Stars that blend, metals mend. Nature's rules refuse to bend. Fire and spin, forged within. Iron's twin should always win. It's almost funny how small details can shatter grand assumptions. Every rock, every meteor, every chunk of cosmic debris ever studied has shown the same recipe. Nickel and iron, a cosmic couple formed from supernova fusion. You find them together in meteorites, planetary cores, even the dust that built Earth. But 3I Atlas broke that rule completely. No iron signatures at all, just nickel, refined, intentional. That word refined echoed through the research labs like a cough in a cathedral. You can refine metals in factories. You can separate elements in smelters. You can create alloys with purpose. But you don't find industrial purity in comets. You don't get stainless steel in nature. Heat divides, metal hides, purity where chaos collides. Fire tamed, elements named, silence forged, and unashamed. You can picture the scientists staring at the spectra, watching those bright emission lines glow like fingerprints. There's no mistaking it. Nickel, unalloyed, unblemished. Not dust, not mixed ore metal. Some tried to explain it away. Perhaps solar radiation burned off lighter compounds. Perhaps micrometeorite impacts stripped the surface unevenly. Yet even those excuses crumbled under scrutiny. Pure nickel can't simply appear by accident. Not across an entire body the size of Manhattan, which leaves you with the unsettling possibility that someone or something made it that way. Stars align, hands design, purpose hums in nickel's shine. Chance denied, truth implied, silence where the forges died. In a way, it's poetic. Nickel and iron form together inside collapsing stars, the ultimate natural union. Separating them takes precision, technology, and intent. The universe marries, industry divorces, and 3I Atlas, with its flawless nickel signature, feels like a divorce decree written across the solar system. A.V. Loeb and his team noted it carefully, the way you might note a glitch that feels like meaning. The spectra showed consistency across different wavelengths, ruling out artifact or interference. This wasn't a trick of light, it was composition, a purity level too high to occur by natural formation, too uniform to be coincidence. Now imagine standing beside it. If you could, the surface would gleam, like brushed steel, dull silver, under sunlight, absorbing heat without complaint. If you tapped it, the sound would ring, not thud. It would feel manufactured, not the porous, powdery texture of rock, but smooth, cool, dense, like the hull of a machine that's been traveling far too long. Metal sleeps, silence keeps, echoes hum, where memory seeps. Light reflects, time forgets, reason bends, then reconnects. Then, you have to bin. Nickel, of course, is no stranger to us. We use it everywhere: coins, turbines, batteries, spacecraft shielding. It resists corrosion, laughs at magnetism, and keeps its luster even in the vacuum of space. If you wanted to build something that could wander between stars for centuries without decaying, nickel would be your metal of choice. So when the spectral data came back showing a body made almost entirely of it, the scientific community did what scientists always do. They argued politely. Some blamed instrument error. Others called it a statistical outlier. A few, quietly, admitted what everyone was thinking, but no one dared say nickel without iron isn't geology, it's engineering. Numbers speak, doubts grow weak, metal hums the code we seek. Fire's child, purpose wild, silence forged and reconciled. The implications are dizzying. A structure made of pure nickel would be incredibly durable, resistant to micrometeor impacts, radiation, and heat. It could survive the chaos of interstellar travel for millennia, maybe longer. It's the kind of material you'd use if you wanted to build something meant to last forever. And maybe that's the point. Maybe 3i Atlas wasn't built recently at all. Maybe it's ancient, a relic drifting through star systems long after its makers vanished, still shining like a coin tossed into the cosmic fountain of time. Stars will fade, light will trade, metal keeps what minds have made. Dust may die, echoes lie, nickel gleams beneath the sky. It's humbling, isn't it? All our history, all our machinery, all our ambition, and yet somewhere out there, a quiet object crosses our path, carrying metallurgy that laughs at entropy. No message carved on its surface, no obvious purpose, just a body of pure nickel, moving backward through our system as though retracing memory itself. If it were chance, it would be messy, but this is clean, too clean. And in the language of the cosmos, cleanliness is intent. Fire's mark through the dark, whispers hum from metal's spark. Stars decay, paths obey, something built will find its way. Maybe that's the real message of 3i Atlas, not in its orbit, or its glow, or its trajectory, but in its very atoms. A quiet, metallic whisper that says, we were here, we knew how to build things that last, and now, so do you. Let us step back from the direct evidence and consider the profound context of possibility. Exploring Part 15, the Oort Cloud Echo and Ancient Intent. If 3i Atlas is not a visitor from another star system, but an ancient artifact from within our own, then its builders must have been a civilization that arose in the most remote, forgotten corner of our cosmic neighborhood. The deepest reserve of cometary material in our solar system is the Oort cloud. It is a vast, spherical shell of icy bodies that begins far beyond the Kuiper belt and extends nearly halfway to the next star. This volume of space is so immense that our systematic exploration of it has been a mere blink of an eye in cosmic time. If a precursor civilization existed here, they would have been adapted to the most extreme conditions: frigid vacuum, low light, and perpetual darkness, with temperatures hovering near 50 Kelvin. For a machine intelligence, this environment provides all the necessities: vast material resources in the form of ice and rock, and immense stretches of time and isolation. The hypothesis suggests that such a civilization, or their long-lived machine descendants, might have chosen to build a network of self-replicating probes, what John von Neumann described to monitor the solar system. These probes would have been designed for eons of survival, relying on internal power sources like radioisotope, thermoelectric generators, and layered construction for durability and camouflage. 3i Atlas, in this light, becomes an Oort cloud echo. It is a relic sent inward long ago, designed to mimic a natural object, but carrying within it the tells of its artificial nature. The hyperbolic trajectory would have been a deliberate disguise, a way to avoid the scrutiny applied to objects that are considered local. The object's current behavior, the fixed shadow, the controlled thrust, the mass loss paradox, then becomes the symptom of a dormancy protocol that has failed, or a deliberate activation sequence that has triggered. The probe's mission, encoded in its simple AI, was to detect a specific event: the emergence of technological intelligence on the third planet. Our own radio transmissions and spacecraft launches would have been the trigger. The appearance of the butterfly hole in October 29th, 2025, the exact time of the probe's hidden closest approach, takes on an entirely new, mythic meaning under this hypothesis. It becomes a manifestation of that ancient intent. If the probe is a product of an Oort cloud intelligence, then its encounter with the Sun was not an accident, but a deliberate maneuver to either harvest energy or execute a final data transmission to an unknown receiver. The butterfly hole would be the scar of that interaction, a localized magnetic disturbance caused by the massive, intentional release of plasma or electromagnetic energy from the probe's internal systems. The butterfly, the symbol of transformation, would be the final message, telling us that a deep space intelligence has noticed our metamorphosis into a spacefaring species. This shifts the entire paradigm of the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. We are not looking for tiny signals from light years away. We are looking at the first physical evidence of an intelligence native to our own solar system. An intelligence that is either long gone, a ghost ship, or is still out there in the cold, watching us discover their relic. This requires us to see the solar system not as a sterile playground, but as a vast, ancient, and potentially still populated cosmic stage. Let's pause, take a breath, and look at the growing pile of cosmic excuses. For months now, the official line has stayed the same. NASA calls 3i Atlas a comet, a harmless icy traveler from the deep dark, just passing through. But comets don't burn nickel. They don't glide backward through the solar system, in perfect alignment with the ecliptic. And they certainly don't say hello with a 2 gigawatt radio transmission. At some point, Comet starts to sound less like an explanation and more like a bedtime story scientists tell themselves so they can sleep. Stars will lie, reasons die, numbers hum beneath the sky. Truth will wait, minds debate, silence holds a secret state. You can picture the conference rooms, fluorescent lights, paper cups, polite tension. Someone at NASA taps the microphone and clears their throat. Cometary behavior, they say, while half the audience glances at the slide showing a nickel-rich body flying backward. They nod, because that's what scientists do in public. But the math doesn't nod back. The equations just sit there, glowing quietly, refusing to behave. 3. Atlas doesn't act like anything nature has built before. A natural comet wobbles, tumbles, erodes. It spews gases, sheds dust, loses integrity near the Sunday. But 3 Atlas, it stabilizes as it approaches. Its light curve smooths, its rotation slows. It resists heat like a craftsman's alloy. Every new data point pries one more excuse from nature's grip. Fire stands, logic lands, reason trembles in its hands. Light refrains, gravity strains, order hums through cosmic veins. To call it a comet is almost an act of nostalgia, a way to preserve the comfort of categories. Because if it's not a comet, then we're forced into the wilderness beyond naming. That uneasy space where words like artifact start creeping into PowerPoint slides. And the universe, historically, doesn't hand us many artifacts. Let's review the facts calmly. Comets don't burn nickel. Their spectra reveal volatile gases, water vapor, carbon dioxide, cyanide compounds, but not refined metals. Nickel requires temperatures hot enough to vaporize steel. Comets don't fly retrograde. The planets orbit one way. 3 Atlas cruises the other, like a salmon swimming upstream through gravity itself. Comets don't align with the ecliptic. Random visitors arrive at odd inclinations, cutting through the solar plane like drifters. This one hugs the planetary path, like it knows the route. Comets don't emit gigawatt radio pulses. 2 billion watts at the hydrogen line isn't natural. It's deliberate. You can see the problem. Every time science tries to tuck it neatly into the comet drawer, the drawer jams. Dust may spin. Tales begin. Reason wears a fragile grin. Stars will mock. Comets talk. Silence hums beyond the clock. Still, NASA has to call it something. Bureaucracies don't like mysteries. They prefer acronyms. Unexplained artificial body doesn't fit the funding forms. So, Comet. It's safe, familiar, boring. Yet every update sounds more like an apology than a discovery. A press release reads, "The object exhibits unusual, compositional and dynamical properties, consistent with, though not typical of, a cometary origin." Translation: we have no idea, but it's probably fine. The public reads this, sips coffee, shrugs. But you, lying there with your headphones and curiosity, know that probably fine is science's version of whistling in the dark. Graphs misbehave, data brave, numbers whisper from the grave. Chance denies, starlight lies, wonder flickers in our eyes. It's not that scientists are wrong, they're cautious. The word artificial carries a weight that could collapse careers. To admit that something might be engineered is to rewrite physics textbooks, funding proposals, and bedtime comfort alike. But reality doesn't ask permission before being strange. You can imagine the meeting when someone, quietly, after too many coffee refills, says the forbidden thought, "What if it isn't natural?" Silence follows. Not because they disagree, but because they can't afford to agree. The universe is supposed to be indifferent, not intentional. But every time 3i Atlas flashes its forward-facing glow, every time its nickel skin gleams through the sun's glare, the idea of indifferent feels a little thinner. Fire's tone, metal groan, whispers hum through the unknown. Chance decays, order stays, night repeats its quiet phrase. Imagine if Earth had sent something like this centuries ago, a probe built to last forever, designed to glide through systems without revealing itself. That's not science fiction, that's foresight. We build things to endure. Voyager, Pioneer, golden records floating through eternity. Maybe somewhere, someone else did too. And maybe, just maybe, we've mistaken their legacy for a comet. Stars align, code divine. Echoes cross the boundary line. Truth will crawl, pride will fall. Silence answers after all. At some point, the simplest explanation stops being the most honest. Call it a comet if it helps you sleep. But when nature runs out of excuses, what's left isn't madness. It's acknowledgement. The universe, it turns out, might be trying to tell us something, and doing so in the only language we've learned to ignore. Eyes awake, dawn will break, reason bends, but will not fake. Fire remains, mystery reigns, silence hums through nickel veins. Let us now zoom out from the immediate anomalies of 3i, Atlas, and the Sun, and turn our focus toward the largest of all questions, contemplating Part 16, the cosmic perspective, a universal design. This shifts our focus to the principles of engineering that would govern any interstellar probe, regardless of its origin, and how these principles might converge on the very design we are observing. The universe, in its elegant complexity, suggests a profound degree of convergence, just as life on Earth, when faced with the challenge of flight, independently developed wings in birds, bats, and insects. So too would intelligent engineering converge on the most efficient designs for interstellar travel and longevity. Any civilization, whether it arose on Earth, Mars, or in the distant Oort cloud, faces the same merciless physics. The universal requirements for any interstellar probe designed to survive for millions of years are simple: power, propulsion, and resilience. First, power and efficiency. The probe must have an internal energy source. This must be long-lived and independent of stellar light. The solution is universally radioactive decay, such as a radioisotope thermoelectric generator, or an advanced version of it. This system provides both power for electronics and stable heat for thermal management. The fact that 3i Atlas displays a mass loss paradox and sustained water venting far from the Sun is simply the most efficient method of using that internal heat for thermal management and low-level thrust. It is a universal design choice. Second, propulsion and maneuver. To traverse the galaxy, a probe needs efficient, subtle trajectory control. The most fuel-efficient method in the void is low, continuous thrust applied at key gravitational moments. This is precisely the signature of the non-gravitational acceleration detected in 3i Atlas. Furthermore, to enter a star system and maximize observation of planetary systems, a probe must align itself with the ecliptic plane. The most fuel-efficient way to achieve this is through a controlled burn at perihelion, which, ironically, results in a hyperbolic trajectory that looks like a random flyby. The disguised origin strategy is not a clever trick. It is an optimal engineering solution for an object that must maneuver while remaining unnoticed. Third, resilience, and camouflage. To survive micrometeoroids, radiation, and the thermal cycling of vast distances, the probe must be modular and self-repairing. Our own modular, autonomous, reconfigurable spacecraft prototypes show this is the future of deep space design. The machine must also be disguised. The most effective camouflage in a system full of rocks and ice is to look like a comet. Coating the probe in a shell of ice and dust and letting the sun activate the outgassing is the simplest, most effective way to blend in. The GCR processed crust, the thick, tarry shell created by eons of radiation, would be an accidental but perfect, natural extension of this camouflage. From this cosmic perspective, the anomalies of 3I Atlas cease to be a bewildering list of strange exceptions and begin to look like an engineering blueprint. The fixed shadow, the symmetrical jets, the low-thrust trajectory, and the butterfly hole, potentially a side effect of a stellar observation maneuver, all line up with a universal design for an eons-long autonomous probe. This convergence suggests that whether the object was built by a civilization tens of thousands of light-years away or by the ghost civilization of the Oort cloud, the result is the same: an unmanned, self-managing, camouflaged system. We are looking at a machine that is an expression of universal engineering principles, a demonstration of what is required to survive the vast, cold emptiness of the cosmos. This realization inevitably leads us to a profound reflection on our own place in the solar drama. Let's quiet the room again. No more conference chatter, no orbit charts, no data sheets fluttering like nervous wings. Just you and the hum of thought. Because suppose it wasn't a greeting at all. Suppose the wow signal wasn't a hello, but a test, a single, controlled pulse, sent to see who's listening, not a conversation, a calibration. The universe doesn't ask for applause, it checks for an echo. Waves align, stars design, silence hums a steady sign. Light will speak, soft and sleek, meaning hides in what we seek. It's unsettling, isn't it? To imagine that the greatest mystery in modern astronomy might not be communication, but maintenance. A beacon, not a broadcast. A simple test pattern in the dark, like tapping a microphone before speaking. Can anyone hear me? It would explain the brevity, the precision, the absence of follow-up. Not an invitation, not a message, just proof of reach. If you wanted to confirm your signal could cross light years, you wouldn't waste time with language. You'd use mathematics. You'd pick the hydrogen line 1,420 megahertz, the frequency every civilization with radio would recognize. You'd pulse it once, clean and narrow, strong enough to punch through cosmic noise. Then you'd listen, not for a reply, but for reflection, for confirmation that the experiment worked. Stars that ring, signals sing. Truth may not mean anything. Tone so pure, purpose obscure. Silence hums what words endure. That would make the wow signal the universe's equivalent of a test tone, the faint beep before the song begins. And maybe the song never came. Maybe it wasn't meant to. Maybe whoever or whatever sent it had already moved on. Because calibration isn't a conversation. It's a proof of existence. Think of a lighthouse. It doesn't talk to ships. It doesn't expect a reply. It simply turns, flashing its beam through fog and tide, trusting that someone might notice. That's all it takes, a signal to say, we're still here. And maybe that's what the wow signal was. The flash of a lighthouse, whose keeper is long gone. Light will spin, tides begin, memory hums from deep within. Stars will fade, marks are made, silence hums what time forbade. The idea fits the evidence too neatly to ignore. A one-time event, clean, deliberate, perfectly tuned. No repeats, because repetition wasn't the point. The beacon didn't fail, it succeeded. We heard it. We just didn't realize we were the experiment. Now, fast forward to 3I Atlas, an object arriving decades later along the same celestial corridor, moving toward us, retrograde, deliberate. You start to wonder, what if the signal wasn't just testing, hearing, but timing, a calibration between distance and motion? The kind of test you'd run if you were sending something across the stars and needed to ensure it would pass within range of the right planet at the right time. Stars recall, patterns call, echoes build a cosmic wall. Light repeats, silence greets, motion hums through hidden streets. It's possible, strangely poetic even, that the wow signal was never a message meant for us to decode. It was the opening tone of a navigation system, a ping from a distant source marking coordinates, calibrating trajectory, confirming arrival windows. And 3I Atlas? The physical arrival that followed the calibration ping half a century later. We've done similar things. When Voyager left the solar system, NASA sent pings to measure the delay, to fine-tune its position. Before GPS satellites could guide planes and ships, they needed calibration beacons, steady, repetitive tones. Maybe the same principle works on a cosmic scale. Maybe someone or something was synchronizing with us. It doesn't sound romantic, does it? The idea that the most famous signal from the stars wasn't a greeting but a systems check. Yet somehow that makes it more chilling. Because if the wow signal wasn't meant for us, then we only overheard it, like a passerby catching half a sentence meant for someone else. Stars will hum what we become. Echoes chase where meanings run. Voices stray far away. Silence answers what we say. That might be why it never repeated, because the test was complete. The beacon was satisfied. We heard the ping, logged it, puzzled over it for half a century, and then watched as 3I Atlas appeared right on cue, like a courier arriving precisely on schedule. A calibration, not a conversation. Light aligns, unseen signs. Math replaces grand designs. Echoes near, none to hear. Silence keeps its engineer. So maybe that's what the wow signal truly was. The hum of maintenance in a universe that never stopped building. A system check from a civilization that might no longer exist. Their machinery still running quietly on autopilot. And if that's the case, then somewhere out there in the darkness, the beacon might still be humming, soft, periodic, patient, waiting for the next test, the next receiver, the next moment of recognition. Because sometimes, communication isn't about talking at all. It's about knowing someone, somewhere, still can. Stars will burn, signals turn, silence hums until we learn. Light will roam, far from home, beacons shine though no one's home. Let us pause now in the gentle, ceaseless flow of the cosmic narrative, turning our gaze inward for part 17, the human reflection, our place in the solar drama. The object 3I Atlas is not merely a scientific anomaly. It is a mirror held up to humanity, forcing us to redefine our position in the universe and confront our own technological destiny. For centuries, humanity has assumed it is the sole intelligence, the only architect in its own cosmic backyard. Our view of the solar system is one of sterility and silence, where we, on the third planet, are the only actors. 3i Atlas challenges this comforting certainty. If the Oort cloud echo hypothesis is correct, then intelligence arose here, not once, but at least twice. It means that we are not the first technological species in this solar system. And if the universal design hypothesis is correct, then our own ultimate space exploration probes will look and behave exactly like 3i Atlas. The object we are studying is a projection of our own technological future. This discovery forces us into a profound state of humility. We have been so focused on listening for signals from distant stars that we overlooked the possibility of a precursor civilization that arose and vanished in the cold, dark reaches of our own neighborhood. The great silence we observe in the outer solar system may not be empty. It may be quietly populated by millions of dormant, camouflaged artifacts. The very act of the probe's activation in 2025 suggests we have finally reached a technological level that is noticeable. Our radio transmissions, our spacecraft launches, our atmospheric changes have triggered an ancient, sleeping mechanism. 3. Atlas is not just passing by, it is responding to us. This realization transforms the Sun encounter from a mere curiosity into a key piece of the solar drama. The butterfly hole, that perfectly symmetrical scar on the Sun, becomes a possible data log, a silent record of the probe's interaction with the Sun's magnetic architecture. It is the first tangible evidence that something other than the Sun's own forces has left a mark on our star. The human reflection is about endurance. A civilization that could build a machine to survive for millions of years has solved the problems of longevity that we are only now beginning to face. 3i Atlas is a testament to the immense power of simplicity, redundancy, and passive systems. It shows us that true technological mastery is not about speed or show, but about the patient, quiet ability to endure time itself. The greatest lesson it teaches is the need for curiosity and vigilance. The anomalies of 3i Atlas, the fixed shadow, the thrust, the solar interaction, only became apparent because astronomers refused to accept the first, easy explanation. They kept looking closer, demanding access to raw data, and training artificial intelligence to find patterns that the human eye missed. We must continue to look at the Sun and the cosmos, not as a benign, predictable background, but as a living system where extraordinary events can, and do, happen. The GCR processing of the crust, the mass loss paradox, the cannibal CME, all of these are reminders that our models are approximations. 3i Atlas is a call to action, demanding that we finally send a mission to rendezvous with this profound puzzle, to definitively test whether it is a geological fluke or a ghost from our own past. Let's dim the universe for a moment and shift perspective, not as the listener this time, but as the eavesdropper, because maybe the wow signal wasn't meant for us at all. Maybe 3i Atlas wasn't sending a greeting across the void, but checking in with something already here, another node in a network we don't yet perceive. We just happen to be standing between two old friends mid-conversation. Waves will pass, stars like glass, silence hums through cosmic mass, voices near, none to hear, meaning hums from engineer. It's humbling to think that all our excitement, the headlines, the research papers, the red ink circling, Wow, might just be background noise in a dialogue far older and far smarter than us. The universe, after all, is under no obligation to make us the main character. For all we know, 3i Atlas was simply sending a check-in ping to another system, something small, ancient, and patient, humming quietly somewhere near Earth's orbit or beyond it. You can almost imagine the scene, a silent relay drifting near the asteroid belt, cold and indifferent, its sensors long asleep until that one perfect frequency brushed across them, a faint hum of activation, a spark, a response we never noticed because it wasn't meant for human ears. Stars will weave, minds conceive, networks hum that none believe, waves align, undefined, echoes hum in grand design. That idea isn't even as far-fetched as it sounds. Humanity already does this on a smaller scale. Our satellites talk to each other without us listening. Our planetary probes ping home to automated receivers. Our telescopes sync through software we never directly hear. So why should the cosmos be any different? Maybe 3. Atlas is one node in a galactic web, a chain of ancient machines spanning light years, each whispering to the next, maintaining an infrastructure too vast for us to comprehend. We might have mistaken an interstellar handshake for a revelation. Imagine that for a moment. 2 devices, built long before we existed, communicating in the universal language of hydrogen line radio. Not a conversation, a status update. All systems nominal. Continue transmission. We intercepted one side of it, pure coincidence. Like a fly buzzing through a Wi-Fi signal. Light will ring, networks sing, whispers hum through everything. Stars comply, systems tie, order hums across the sky. If that's true, then the real message isn't to us, it's around us. The universe could be filled with communication we never notice, because it's not encoded for our biology. We only detect the accidental harmonics, the way a child might hear a faint vibration from the neighbor's radio through the wall. And here's the haunting part. What if the other node, the one receiving the signal, is right here in our backyard, not buried in the earth or sitting on the moon, but drifting somewhere near, disguised as just another rock? There are millions of near-Earth objects we've never catalogued, some large enough to hide entire structures. What if one of them occasionally wakes up, listens, replies, and then goes silent for decades at a time? Night will fade, plans are made, whispers hum through cosmic trade. Dust and stone, not alone. Memory hums in undertone. Avi Loeb once said, "The scariest thing about interstellar visitors isn't that they might find us, but that they might already know us, and simply not care." 3. Atlas could be one of many, part of a network that long ago lost its creators but continues running, self-maintaining, unfeeling, the way our own satellites will keep orbiting long after we're gone, transmitting weather data to no one. So maybe what we heard wasn't a message of life, but the echo of maintenance, machines talking to machines, technology outliving purpose. That thought alone shifts the story's tone from wonder to melancholy. Because if that's true, then the wow signal wasn't proof of intelligence, it was proof of persistence, of something built to keep speaking, even when there's no one left to listen. Stars repeat, time's heartbeat, silence hums through obsolete, voices cross, meanings loss, networks hum their endless gloss. Picture it, 3 Atlas, drifting through the solar system, glowing faintly forward like a ship scanning for a reply. The transmission ping passes Earth, maybe even refracts through our atmosphere, bouncing off satellites, filling our detectors with coincidence, and then nothing. The signal fades. The node sleeps again. The conversation continues elsewhere. We weren't the audience. We were the interference pattern. And that's the most unsettling possibility of all, that we've mistaken someone else's background noise for our own discovery. Light will fade. Stars parade. Silence hums the plans they made. Dreams awake. Patterns break. Echoes hum for old time's sake. Still, you can't help but feel a kind of quiet awe, because even if the message wasn't for us, even if we were never meant to hear it, we did. We intercepted the hum of eternity for just a moment. We brushed against a system too vast to imagine, and maybe that's enough. Maybe that single whisper, caught by accident, was the universe's way of saying, "You're in the network now." We return now to the heart of the mystery, focusing on the sun's dramatic response to the comet's passage and asking Part 18, the Great Silence. What did the sun say? The question is not simply whether the sun spoke, but what message was encoded within the perfection of the butterfly hole and the subsequent magnetic chaos. The sun, in its furious indifference, maintains a profound silence toward human inquiries. It operates on a timescale that dwarfs our own, and its magnetic forces obey physics, not our need for neat answers. Yet, the three simultaneous anomalies that emerged from the same, previously hidden, hemisphere are impossible to ignore. Anomaly 1, the geometric void, the butterfly hole, 35 Earths wide, and unnervingly symmetrical. Anomaly 2, the X5.1 flare, the explosive release of radiation from the same general area, signaling immense, localized magnetic stress. Anomaly 3, the cannibal CME, the magnetic superstorm that resulted from the merging of two solar plasma eruptions, causing global auroras and technological disruption. These three events, clustered around the perihelion of the highly anomalous 3I Atlas, represent a profound departure from the background noise of solar weather. The question, what did the sun say, must be approached through the lens of both Model A and Model B. If Model A coincidence is correct, the sun said, "I am unpredictable, and your timing is unfortunate." The sun, approaching solar maximum, was simply magnetically unstable. The butterfly hole was a rare magnetic configuration. The flare was a natural outburst, and the cannibal CME was an unrelated collision. The butterfly shape, the eerie symmetry, was simply a product of magnetic geometry that we find visually striking. The message is one of cosmic indifference, a reminder that we live on a planet constantly buffeted by the forces of a giant nuclear reactor. This interpretation is scientifically sound and requires no new physics. If Model B, interaction, is correct, the sun said, the threshold has been crossed. The intense outgassing of ionized plasma from the highly active 3I Atlas, the massive release required to fuel the mass loss paradox and achieve the observed thrust, acted as the catalyst. The probe's presence injected a concentrated stream of material into the solar corona, tipping an already unstable magnetic region into a complete collapse, manifesting as the butterfly hole. The hole, therefore, is a scare. The message is one of recognition, a response to the emergence of a new technological intelligence in the solar system. The true message is likely suspended between these two poles. The most important part of the event is the great silence that followed the magnetic chaos. The sun offered no explanation. 3I Atlas offered no signal. The silence is deafening. The event was documented, recorded, and analyzed, but the intent remains shrouded in mystery. The key to deciphering the sun's cryptic message lies not in the magnetic fire, but in the perfect symmetry of the whole. Symmetry is a tell. It implies a force acting upon the sun that is organized and uniform, a force far more specific than the chaotic nature of the sun itself. The sun can produce large holes, but the mirrored perfection suggests a specific, directed energy release. The sun's silence, coupled with the probe's prior anomalies, compels us toward the narrative of the engineered message. The sun, in its reaction, served as the cosmic printing press for an ancient silent warning: we are not alone. As the sun slowly calmed its turbulent hemisphere, and as 3I Atlas sped away, heading back toward the interstellar void, we enter Part 19, the unresolved fade. The long watch continues. This segment addresses the final, unsatisfying truth of the story. The mystery has not been solved, and the object has slipped away, leaving us only with its ambiguous legacy. The comet is fading now, disappearing into the dark beyond our solar system. Even the most powerful telescopes, like the James Webb Space Telescope, will eventually lose sight of it. Its journey will continue, measured in millions of years and light years, while our opportunity for direct observation has ended. The question of whether 3I Atlas is a natural comet or an artificial probe remains in a state of suspended animation. The natural camp points to the plausibility of the GCR processed crust, explaining the chemical and dynamic anomalies. The artificial camp points to the accumulation of statistical improbabilities that lead to the geometric perfection of the solar interaction. Neither side can deliver the final, definitive proof. This unresolved fade is, in many ways, the natural conclusion of a cosmic puzzle. The universe rarely provides simple answers. It forces us to live in a state of profound uncertainty, where we must embrace the possibility that both narratives could, in some way, be true. A naturally formed comet that, through a statistically improbable chain of events, perfectly mimicked the behavior of an ancient, engineered probe. The immediate scientific task is the long watch. Astronomers will continue tracking the comet for as long as possible, using every available instrument to capture any last data points. They will monitor the ongoing non-gravitational acceleration to see if it remains consistent with controlled thrust or chaotic outgassing. They will look for any final, unexpected brightening events or radio signals. The most critical effort, however, is the post-mortem analysis of the Sun incident. Solar physicists will spend years analyzing the X5.1 flare and the cannibal CME, feeding data into simulations to determine if the cluster of events was, in fact, an inevitable, though rare, consequence of the Sun approaching its solar maximum. If future solar maximums produce similar symmetrical coronal holes without the presence of an interstellar comet, the coincidence model will be greatly strengthened. The legacy of 3I Atlas will not be a definitive answer, but a new set of benchmarks. Future interstellar visitors will now be measured against its oddities, their orbital inclination, their carbon dioxide ratios, their mass loss rates, and, most certainly, their solar interaction dynamics. The comet has left behind a legacy of wonder and a blueprint for what to look for next. The only way to move beyond the fade is to prepare for a future rendezvous mission. The next interstellar object that approaches our Sun must be met with an intercept probe. The investment would be immense, but the prize a definitive answer to the question of whether we are alone, is the most profound discovery possible. The human imagination, however, will not wait for the science. The image of the butterfly hole will linger for decades, a cosmic scar that reminds us of the time a quiet visitor from the stars passed close, and our sun responded with an act of symmetrical drama. The comet may vanish from our telescopes, but it will never vanish from human imagination. We have reached the end of the evidence, and so we must conclude with a final synthesis, daring to propose. Part 20. Final hypothesis: the stellar engineered artifact. This is the narrative that ties the butterfly hole to the cosmic history of the object, embracing the most extraordinary possibility that the universe has presented us. Let us construct a narrative that accounts for the threefold anomaly with a single, elegant mechanism. The object is a stellar-engineered artifact, a probe designed for longevity and stellar observation. Hypothesis point 1: the disguise and anomalies. The object was constructed by an ancient intelligence, perhaps millions of years ago, to fulfill a universal requirement: survive unnoticed. It was coated in an icy shell to mimic a comet. The non-gravitational acceleration and the symmetrical jets are the signatures of its low-thrust propulsion and active stabilization system, designed for the most efficient, optimal, hyperbolic maneuver. The highly processed surface and high carbon dioxide content are the inevitable result of eons of GCR exposure. Hypothesis point 2: the activation and intent. The probe carried a dormancy protocol that was triggered by the detection of humanity's rising technological activity, our radio transmissions and spacecraft launches in 2025. Its primary mission, encoded in its AI, was to perform a close-range stellar and planetary survey. To execute this survey, it required a precise, close-range maneuver that provided the necessary gravitational assist and observation window. Hypothesis point 3: the stellar interaction. The object's close passage at perihelion was not a passive flyby, but a deliberate stellar observation maneuver to efficiently gather data from the sun's magnetic field and plasma. The probe needed to inject a burst of ionized material or electromagnetic energy. The burst, perhaps a byproduct of an immense internal energy consumption for data acquisition or a final trajectory correction, acted as the catalyst. This intentional, symmetric energy release, operating on a level of organization far superior to the sun's own chaos, triggered the magnetic collapse in the already stressed solar corona. The consequence was the butterfly hole. The perfect symmetry was not a product of random solar magnetism, but the imprint of the object's organized, engineered release, an act of physics that left a fleeting, geometric scar on the solar surface. The sun, in its reaction, served as the cosmic recording medium for an event that should never have happened naturally. This hypothesis answers the fundamental question of the butterfly hole. The sun was not speaking, it was reacting. The butterfly hole is the signature of a stellar-engineered artifact performing its mission. The three anomalies tied to the butterfly hole are therefore: 1. Geometric perfection, implying directed energy. 2. Mass loss paradox, implying internal power. 3. Timing, implying intentional maneuver. The mythic link is the butterfly, the symbol of transformation, marking humanity's passage into a space-aware species. We are left with a final, open-ended thought. The builders of this machine, whether they were the ghosts of the Oort cloud or a distant extragalactic intelligence, intended their probe to be a silent observer. But in the great flow of cosmic time, the machine has malfunctioned. Its disguise is cracking, its control is erratic, and its mission signature has been revealed by the sun itself. We may not have found the architects, but we have found the architectural blueprint. The search for the ultimate truth continues. With the sun's silent scar guiding the way, we may already be part of the experiment. And so, the cannibal storm passes, the X5.1 flare fades, and the butterfly hole closes, leaving us in a quiet twilight of reflection. We have tracked a shadow, followed a whisper, and found evidence of purpose in the vast indifference of space. The human journey is one of perpetual wonder, yet our resilience is great. Our ancestors survived soup that might kill you, so we can certainly survive a good cosmic mystery. We will continue the long watch. The sun keeps its secrets, but history bends, but never breaks its commitment to the truth. Sleep now, and let the quiet wonder of the stars protect you.